My name is Gwen. I am 36. Last summer, after a brutal 14-hour drive from Memphis, my kids and I arrived at my grandma's farm for the reunion. We hadn't seen them in 4 years. Instead of a warm welcome, my aunt blocked the door, stared me down, and announced, "You are not real family. Who invited you?" The worst part wasn't her cruelty. It was my own mother standing just 4 feet away, silently refusing to look at me. My terrified 5-year-old buried her face into my legs. My 8-year-old son watched, completely broken. I didn't cause a scene, and I didn't cry. I calmly buckled my babies into the car, drove 2 miles down the road, and dialed one number. Just 72 hours later, the relatives who cast me out were desperately pleading for my mercy. Before I tell you what happened, if this story connects with you, a like or subscribe means more than you know, but only if it's genuine. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from. Let me take you back to the morning of August 14th. The day I woke up at 3 a.m., packed my car, and began the 14-hour drive that broke my world apart and rebuilt it. Memphis was still swallowed in darkness. The air outside was heavy and quiet. I carried Layla out to the driveway first. She didn't even stir, just curled tightly into her car seat like a tiny, peaceful comma. Miles walked out on his own. His favorite backpack hung over one small shoulder, his eyes heavy and half-closed with sleep. "Mom, it's nighttime," he whispered, his voice thick with exhaustion. "I know, baby. We've got a long drive," I whispered back, gently kissing his forehead. "I just want you to know where you come from," I thought to myself as I buckled him in. "I want you to have roots." I had packed everything the night before. Swimsuits, sticky bottles of sunscreen, Miles's beloved Nerf football, and Layla's worn-out stuffed rabbit she refused to sleep without. Beside them sat a foil-covered dish of potato salad. It was my grandmother's recipe. She taught me how to make it when I was just 14, standing on a wobbly step stool in her warm kitchen in Camden, Alabama. That heavy glass bowl felt like my ticket back home. 14 hours. 850 miles. We made 3 gas station stops. One because Miles has a bladder the size of a walnut, another because Layla demanded goldfish crackers, and a 5-year-old's tantrum in a moving car is a battle you simply do not fight. I hadn't been to the family reunion in 4 long years. The year before my divorce, I went alone because my ex-husband refused to deal with my relatives. After the split, my demanding job kept me away. Back-to-back night shifts in the emergency room do not care about your lonely heart or your family calendar. But this year was going to be different. I traded shifts with 2 amazing coworkers. I called in favors I had saved up for nearly 20 months. They need to know their cousins, I told myself as the highway lines blurred by. They need to run on their grandmother's land. We finally pulled onto the familiar dirt road in Camden at 5:30 p.m. My chest tightened with nervous excitement. I could see the cars lined up in the grass, 9, maybe 14 of them. Soft country music floated through the thick summer trees. Someone had strung bright white lights across the porch railing. Miles pressed his small hands and face against the car window. "Mom, are all these people our family?" he asked, his eyes wide with wonder. I smiled. Yes, I was so terribly wrong. I held Layla on my hip, her warm weight comforting me. Miles walked a few steps ahead, tucking his football under his arm, already searching the yard for kids his age. I balanced the heavy bowl of potato salad in my free hand. We climbed the wooden porch steps. I knew the creak of these boards. I had climbed them every single summer since I was 7 years old. The screen door swung open. My Aunt Martha filled the doorway. She didn't step aside. She didn't offer a hug or even a forced smile. Her face was made of stone. She looked at me, then her cold eyes darted down to my innocent kids. Behind her, the living room was alive with joyful noise. 16, maybe 20 voices laughing together, ice clinking in sweet tea glasses. Then Martha turned back to me. She raised her voice, making absolutely sure everyone within 12 feet could hear her clearly. "Who invited you? This is for real, family." My hands went completely numb. The glass bowl almost slipped from my grip. Miles froze in his tracks. He looked up at me with that raw, heartbreaking expression kids get when they sense danger but lack the vocabulary to explain it. Layla whined and buried her face deep into my neck to hide. I looked past Martha's rigid shoulder. Just 4 feet behind her stood my mother, Diana Evans, 61 years old. She was holding a cold glass of tea, her eyes locked firmly on the wooden floorboards. "Mom." I breathed the word out. begging for a lifeline. Look at me. Defend your grandchildren. Nothing. She didn't look up. She didn't flinch. She just took a slow, deliberate sip of her drink, acting as if I was a stranger off the street. I gave my own mother 6 full seconds to speak up. I counted them in my pounding head, each second feeling like a physical blow to the chest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. She gave me nothing but cold, empty silence. And in that suffocating quiet, as my son's tiny hand began to shake inside mine, I realized the people I drove 850 miles to love were about to make my children pay for a dark secret I didn't even know existed. Martha stood blocking the frame like a harsh bouncer at an exclusive club. I could smell the sweet, smoky barbecue drifting through the thin screen door. Inside, someone erupted into loud, joyful laughter. The happy noise felt like a physical slap across my face. My little boy's fingers trembled violently against my palm. "Hold it together," my brain ordered. "Do not let him feel your panic." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. Begging for love is a pathetic battle you always lose. I simply shifted Layla's sleepy weight higher onto my hip, gripped Miles's hand tighter, and turned my back on them. I left the heavy bowl of potato salad sitting right there on the dusty porch railing. I wasn't going to carry my grandmother's recipe back to the car. Let them look at it. Let them eat it. We walked away. Every crunch of gravel beneath my shoes sounded like breaking glass in the quiet evening air. Behind us, the screen door slammed shut with a sharp, final thud. Nobody called my name. Nobody followed us out. I buckled Layla into her seat. My hands were shockingly steady. In the ER, I have started IV lines on badly hurt patients while trauma alarms screamed all around me. Muscle memory kicks in when your heart is falling apart. You just do the next necessary thing to survive. Miles climbed in without making a single sound. He dropped his favorite Nerf football onto the floor mat and stared blankly out the window, his little shoulders slumped. I threw the car into reverse, drove past the long row of parked family vehicles, and turned onto the empty county road. Exactly 2 miles down, I found a wide shoulder beneath a massive pecan tree. I killed the engine. I just gripped the steering wheel, fighting for air in the sweltering cabin. Layla was already back asleep, her tiny body exhausted by the early morning start. Then Miles spoke. His voice was so quiet, so desperately careful. "Mom, did we do something wrong?" My chest caved in. I turned around to look at his sweet, confused face. "No, baby," I whispered fiercely. "We didn't do anything wrong." He nodded slowly. He didn't completely believe me, but he trusted me enough to let the heavy question go. "I brought you here to be loved," I thought bitterly, "and I walked you right into a trap." I sat in the stifling heat for 3 full minutes. Then I grabbed my phone. I scrolled past Martha's contact, past Mom's, past everyone currently enjoying a party inside a house paid for by a woman who wasn't even there. I tapped one specific name, Grandma Veronica. I wasn't calling to cry. I called because my grandmother was the only soul in this twisted family who deserved the actual truth. She answered on the second ring. Her tone was warm but fragile. She had undergone major hip surgery just 3 weeks prior, and the strong painkillers always made her groggy by late afternoon. "Gwen, how's the reunion, sweetheart? Did Miles try the peach cobbler yet?" My mouth opened, but my throat closed tight. I sat on the side of a lonely dirt road, my babies trapped in the back seat, and I could not form a single sound. "Gwen, you there?" "I'm here, Grandma." "What's wrong? You sound off." I told her exactly what happened. No dramatic tears, no extra flair, just cold, hard facts, reporting it exactly the way I would chart a critical patient's failing vitals. We arrived at 5:30. Martha opened the door. Martha said, "This is for real family." Miles heard it. Layla was in my arms. Mom was standing right there. Mom said nothing. Total silence fell over the line. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the antique clock hanging on Grandma Veronica's living room wall. "Martha said that, in front of the babies?" she finally asked, her voice dropping lower. "Yes, ma'am, and your daughter Diana was right there 4 feet away, holding a glass of sweet tea." Another stretching pause. Then Grandma exhaled. It was a slow, dangerously controlled breath. It was the exact way she breathed when she was calculating a strike, not processing a sadness. "Diana told me you wouldn't be coming," Grandma stated flatly. "She told me you were too proud to show up because you were aggressively saving your trust money for a house down payment. She said you didn't want to answer questions about it." The summer heat instantly vanished from the car. My blood turned to absolute ice. Grandma, my voice shook for the first time. I haven't seen a dime of that money. The phone line suddenly crackled with pure electric fury. Listen to me very carefully, Grandma ordered, her sleepy grogginess completely gone. You drive those babies to the Comfort Inn on Route 17. Check in right now. I will call you back in 3 hours. Do not answer any other calls tonight. Do you hear me? Yes, ma'am. And Gwen? Yeah, you did nothing wrong. Don't you carry that shame for 1 second? She hung up abruptly. I sat under the shadows of that pecan tree, recognizing the fierce tone she had just used. I had only heard it once before in my entire life, decades ago, when someone tried to cheat her out of Grandpa's land. That man lost everything. I started the engine and drove toward the cheap motel, completely unaware that the missing money wasn't just a simple mistake. It was the key to a massive, multi-year betrayal that was about to blow our entire family apart. The morning sun crawled weakly through the dusty blinds of the Comfort Inn. I stood by the cheap plastic dresser, stirring a cup of instant coffee that tasted like burnt dirt. I picked up my phone. The screen lit up with a notification that made my stomach twist into hard knots. Pruitt Family Group Chat. 52 new messages. I tapped the icon with a heavy finger. Martha had posted a massive photo album at 10 p.m. the night before, exactly 1 hour after she chased my babies away into the dark. The pictures were violently happy. The long-serving table on Grandma's porch was draped in a cheerful checkered cloth, groaning under the weight of summer food. Kids ran barefoot across the lush lawn, waving bright sparklers. Uncle Richard stood proudly at the barbecue grill, raising his metal tongs like a hard-won trophy. And then I saw the next photo. My mother, Diana, sitting comfortably in a canvas folding chair. She was smiling a huge, carefree smile, gently bouncing someone else's baby on her knee. She looked so peaceful, I thought, a sickening wave of grief washing over me. Just hours after watching her own flesh and blood get thrown out like garbage, she was laughing. Martha's caption sat proudly at the bottom. Reunion was wonderful this year. So blessed to have real family together. God is good. I scrolled through the 52 replies beneath it. Heart emojis. Best one yet. Miss you all already. Can't wait for next year. I kept scrolling, frantically searching for just one person to say my name. 26 grown adults were typing in that chat. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who had watched me grow up. Relatives I had mailed thoughtful birthday cards to. People I had comforted with flowers when they were sick in the hospital. Not a single one asked, "Hey, where is Gwen?" Not one person cared that I had vanished after a 14-hour drive. My absence wasn't a tragedy to them. It was a convenient relief. I slowly set the phone face down on the desk. My lukewarm coffee sat forgotten. Across the small room, Miles was hunched over his open sketchbook. His colored pencils scratched quietly against the paper. I leaned closer to see his work. He had drawn a large house with a wide porch. Dozens of happy stick figures were crowded inside, colored in bright, warm shades, but off to the far edge of the page, completely separated from the happy house, stood 2 lonely figures sketched in harsh, dark pencil. One tall, one very small, left entirely outside in the blank white space. He saw me looking. Without saying a word, he quickly snapped the book shut, his small jaw tense. My spirit shattered all over again. At 11:15 a.m., my phone suddenly buzzed. It was Uncle Richard. For one desperate, foolish second, a spark of hope flared inside my chest. Finally, someone noticed. Someone actually cares. I answered the call, holding my breath. "Gwen?" "Hey, kiddo," he began, his tone nervous and shifting. "Look, I heard about what happened yesterday with Martha at the door. That just wasn't right." I sat rigidly on the edge of the stiff motel bed. I stayed totally silent. In my family, the phrase "that wasn't right" is never a complete sentence. There is always a hidden but attached to it. "But you know how Martha gets," he sighed, perfectly on cue. "She gets terribly territorial about the reunion. She's been super stressed about the planning. She really means well underneath it all. Maybe next year we just..." She told my kids they are not real family, Uncle Richard. I interrupted, my voice sharp and entirely hollow. A thick pause choked the line. "My son asked me last night if he did something wrong." I pressed on, refusing to let him off the hook. "He is 8 years old. He just drew a picture of the whole family safely inside the house, and us standing out in the cold. He is 8, another long, painful silence. I heard him swallow hard through the speaker. Well, I'll talk to her. I'll smooth things over, he finally mumbled. There it was, the classic family script. Someone behaves like a monster. Someone else promises to talk to them. Nobody actually confronts anyone. The toxic cycle continues, and the person bleeding is expected to wait quietly in the shadows until next year, when they can be hurt all over again. Don't just talk to her, Uncle Richard, I pleaded, my voice cracking with exhaustion. Stand in front of her, protect us. There is a massive difference. He didn't know how to respond to raw honesty. Muffled voices buzzed in the background. His wife was probably warning him to hang up before things got messy. Look, Gwen, I'll see what I can do, okay? Just give it some time. The line went dead. I lowered the phone to my lap. A sudden, crystal-clear realization washed away my remaining sadness, leaving behind pure, focused anger. Richard was supposed to be the best of them, the kindest, the most decent, and even the best man in my family chose comfortable cowardice over doing the right thing. I couldn't wait for anyone to save us. No knight in shining armor was coming to rescue my kids. If I wanted to protect them from this poison, I had to stop being the quiet, compliant niece. I was done waiting for a fake apology. It was time to follow the money, and the horrifying truth I was about to uncover would burn their perfect little world straight to the ground. That afternoon, the small motel room felt like an airtight box. The cheap air conditioner hummed loudly in the corner, blowing out stale, cool air. Layla was finally asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in a deep, exhausted rhythm. Miles sat cross-legged on the floor, watching bright cartoons on the dusty TV with the volume turned almost completely down. He didn't want to make a sound. He was trying to be invisible, and seeing him shrink himself broke my heart all over again. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, clutching my phone. My mind was racing back to the financial paperwork I had signed a decade ago. I took a deep breath to steady my shaking hands and called Grandma Veronica back. She answered on the very first ring, as if she had been sitting in her bed staring at the screen. "I've been waiting for you to call," she said, her voice sharp and intensely alert. "Grandma, I need to ask you something important about the trust." "Go ahead." My palms were sweating. "Am I still listed as a beneficiary?" "Of course you are, sweetheart," she answered instantly, clear confusion bleeding into her tone. "You, your mama, Martha, Richard, and 7 others. Why on earth are you asking me that?" I closed my eyes tight, bracing myself for the answer to my next question. "The disbursement, the annual payout, how much is it per person?" $4,800 every August, she stated firmly. "David Hayes handles it. He has kept the books clean for 18 years. I stopped breathing. The motel walls seemed to close in on me. My brain scrambled to do the basic math. $4,800 a year. It had been exactly 4 years since my brutal divorce, since I moved to Memphis to start over with absolutely nothing. That was $19,200. Money that was meant to keep a safe roof over my children's heads. Money I had never, ever seen. "Grandma," my voice trembled, raw and completely exposed. "I haven't received a single cent in 4 years. The silence that followed on the other end of the line was entirely different from any quiet I had ever heard from her. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It wasn't the heavy pause of sadness. It was the terrifying, absolute stillness of a powerful woman who has just been informed that someone was boldly stealing from her own table. "Say that to me again," she commanded, her words dropping to a dangerous whisper. 4 years. Nothing, I told her, my voice growing stronger with the painful truth. Not a direct deposit, not a paper check, not a single phone call explaining it. Mom always told me Martha was handling the family finances and strictly warned me not to worry about it. I heard a faint, deliberate clink through the speaker. She was setting a glass down on her wooden bedside table with slow, calculated precision. "David Hayes is going to get a very interesting phone call from me in the next 15 minutes, she said, her voice now completely empty of warmth. "Gwen, you listen to me. You let me handle this part. You just take care of those sweet babies. I will take care of the rest." She hung up. There was no gentle goodbye, no sweet pleasantries. She was a woman who had survived 75 years of fiercely managing farmland, deep wealth, and a family full of greedy personalities. She had just learned that someone was playing dirty games with all 3. I sat there listening to the dead tone of my phone. For the first time in 3 agonizing days, the crushing hurt in my chest faded away. I wasn't just a wounded victim anymore. I was finally paying close attention. Let me pause right here for a second. If you are listening to this, and you have ever discovered that your own family was secretly keeping something that rightfully belonged to you, something that could have changed your life, take a deep breath. You are not crazy. It is a specific kind of heartbreak that words can barely describe. If this story is hitting too close to home, please know you are not alone. Let's get back to the motel room. Because Grandma Veronica was just getting started, I didn't hear back from her for the rest of that long afternoon. She had instructed me not to answer any other calls, and I obeyed. But even sitting in that cheap room, I could feel something massive shifting. It was the heavy electric feeling you get right before a summer thunderstorm cracks the sky wide open. Here is what I found out later. David Hayes managed the massive trust and prepared the yearly payouts. When Grandma called him that evening, he pulled the financial records within an hour. The checks had been sent every single August, exactly as she had ordered. But David wasn't the only person watching the money move. At exactly 4 p.m., my phone chimed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Gwen, this is Sarah, the assistant manager at the local bank branch in Camden. I could lose my job for doing this, but I saw the sudden trust inquiry come through. Martha and your mom have been routing your yearly checks into a joint account, but the money never stays there. It gets wire transferred out within 24 hours, straight into Troy's personal account." Troy, Martha's 30-year-old son, the spoiled golden boy of the family who drove leased luxury cars, threw incredibly expensive parties, and had launched 3 different startups that all miserably failed in the last 5 years. He was the greedy black hole swallowing my children's future. The sickening puzzle pieces finally snapped together. My share and my mother's share were both deposited into Diana's checking account. That setup dated back to a simple form I had signed at 24, blindly trusting my mother to hold my funds. For the first 10 years, she swore she was saving it for my future. Then I got married, went through a crushing divorce, got buried in single parenting and hospital shifts, and I simply stopped asking. Hayes easily traced the deposits. Diana's account caught both shares every August, but the cash moved with dizzying speed. The money went in, the money went right back out, and none of it ever reached me. My aunt and my mother hadn't just pushed my children off a porch. They had been picking my pockets for years to fund a golden boy's fake life, and the revenge Grandma Veronica was preparing would leave them nowhere to hide. Grandma Veronica absorbed every shocking word of the bank manager's text. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for a moment to process the heartbreak. Instead, she gave her lawyer, David Hayes, 2 immediate, earth-shattering instructions. First, draw up legal paperwork freezing every single payout from the Pruitt family trust, effective immediately. Second, draft a strict amendment to her personal will, entirely removing Martha Pruitt and Diana Evans as beneficiaries. She demanded both official documents sitting on her hospital tray by sunrise. At 11:30 p.m., my phone vibrated loudly against the cheap nightstand. A text popped up from a number I barely recognized. It was Tara, Martha's 29-year-old daughter. We had been thick as thieves when we were little girls, but we slowly drifted apart once her mother took total control of the family calendar. "I'm sorry about yesterday. That was wrong. I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I'm sorry." My fingers flew across the keyboard. "But you didn't." 3 gray typing dots appeared on the screen, vanished, and quickly appeared again. "I know. I should have. Can I call you?" I carefully slid out of bed and stepped onto the small motel balcony so I wouldn't wake my sleeping babies. The suffocating Alabama heat still clung fiercely to the concrete parking lot at near midnight. Tara spoke in a hushed, trembling whisper. I heard a heavy door click shut in the background. She was hiding at Martha's house, likely locked safely inside a bathroom. "My mom has been doing this twisted stuff for years, Gwen." "Not just to you," Tara confessed, her voice tight with deep shame. "She completely controls who gets to come and who doesn't. She decides who is worthy of being in and who is kicked out. And the money, the reunion budget. Grandma Veronica gives her $18,000 every single summer for the event. It does not cost $18,000. It costs about half that amount, maybe even less." I leaned my tired weight against the rusty metal railing. "Why are you telling me this right now?" "Because my mom looked your sweet daughter directly in the face and told her she wasn't real family. Layla is 5 years old, Gwen. 5. I was standing hidden in the kitchen, and I heard the whole ugly thing through the screen door. I cannot pretend that is okay anymore. I have been pretending for way too long." I didn't respond right away. My tired brain was doing the brutal math again. $9,000 a year, secretly skimmed right off the top of the reunion budget. For exactly how many years? Before she hung up, Tara added one more terrifying detail. Her voice dropped to a barely audible breath. Grandma Veronica called my mom about 30 minutes ago. I have never ever heard my mother sound like that before. Sound like what? I asked, the night air suddenly feeling very still. Scared to death. The next morning, at 8:15 a.m., my own mother finally called. I had been wide awake since 6. Emergency room nurses never sleep past dawn, even on the darkest days of their lives. Gwen, her voice was razor-sharp, tight, and aggressively controlled. This was not the gentle voice of a woman calling to beg for forgiveness. This was the icy tone of a manager trying to contain a massive disaster. What exactly did you tell your grandmother? I poured cheap bottled water into the motel coffee maker and firmly pressed the glowing red button. I told her the truth. You had absolutely no right to drag her into this mess. This is a private matter between family. I almost laughed out loud. Almost. That's really funny. Mom, just yesterday, I wasn't considered family. You are being ridiculously dramatic. Martha was just trying to… Mom, I cut her off, keeping my tone deadly flat. It was the exact same steady voice I used to tell a weeping family that their loved one's next few hours are critical. My little boy asked me if he did something wrong to deserve that. My baby girl buried her wet face into my neck because a grown woman told her she didn't belong in this world. Do not ever tell me I am being dramatic. Heavy silence filled her end of the line. I heard a ceramic coffee mug clink loudly against a granite counter. She was standing in Martha's kitchen. Of course she was. Your grandmother is threatening to freeze the entire trust. She is talking about permanently changing the will. Do you understand what that means for us? I understand exactly what it means. Then call her right now. Fix this problem before it goes too far. Fix this. Those two selfish words told me everything I ever needed to know. She wasn't calling because her soul ached for my children. She was panicking because her comfortable cash supply was suddenly at risk. She didn't bother to dial my number for 36 hours after watching us get chased away like stray dogs. But she dialed it within 18 hours of learning her money might vanish forever. You had 25 years to stand up and protect me. You had 6 crucial seconds at that wooden door. You chose to do absolutely nothing. And now you have the nerve to call me to fix your mess. She hung up first, but my mother's pathetic attempt to silence me was already too late, because a digital bomb was about to drop on every single person in our family, and the terrifying fallout was heading straight to my motel room door. It landed exactly at 3:20 p.m. A synchronized group text and email simultaneously blasted out to every single beneficiary of the Pruitt Family Trust. 13 people. Grandma Veronica did not do things halfway. When she decided to strike, she brought the entire sky down. I was sitting cross-legged on the itchy motel carpet, helping Layla color a princess from a cheap dollar store coloring book, when my phone screen violently lit up. I read the message once. My breath hitched. I read it again, my eyes scanning the unbelievable words. This is Veronica Pruitt. I am writing to inform every member of this family of the following. Effective immediately, all annual disbursements from the Pruitt Family Trust are frozen until further notice. I have instructed my attorney David Hayes to prepare an amendment to my last will and testament. Martha Pruitt and Diana Evans will be removed as beneficiaries until they deliver a written public apology to my granddaughter Gwen Evans and her children Miles and Layla for their disgraceful conduct at the family reunion held at my home, a gathering completely funded by my trust. Additionally, I have requested a full, itemized accounting of reunion expenses for the past 6 years, as the financial figures do not match what was reported to me. I built this trust so that this family would take care of each other. I will absolutely not fund a party that turns away my own blood. Veronica Pruitt. I set the phone down on the floor. Layla looked up from her crayons, sensing the sudden shift in my energy. Mommy, you okay? Yeah, baby, I whispered, pulling her into my lap. I'm okay. I was so much more than okay. For the very first time in my entire adult life, someone in this toxic bloodline had put the raw truth in writing. It wasn't a cowardly whisper hiding in a hallway. It wasn't a vague promise to smooth things over. It was a fearless, ironclad statement with bold names attached, sent out for everyone to witness. My hands began shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from a deeply foreign emotion I hadn't felt in decades. It was the breathtaking feeling of finally being fiercely defended. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. And it did not stop. Uncle Richard called first. His tone was entirely different now. Gone was the casual "you know how Martha is." There were no more gentle suggestions to give it time. "Gwen, please listen to me. I have heavy tuition payments for Tyler due next month. I was counting on that check. Can you talk to Mama Veronica? Explain to her that I had absolutely nothing to do with this mess on the porch." Then came Derek, my older cousin. "What just happened? Why is the trust frozen? I didn't even know you were coming to town." Next was Nicole. "Gwen, I know this whole situation is terrible. I really do. But my kid's orthodontist bills are piling up. I didn't do anything wrong. Can you just ask her to release the individual shares?" 7 frantic calls flooded in over 3 hours. Every single conversation followed the exact same sickening pattern. A lightning-fast, hollow acknowledgement that something mildly bad happened to my kids, followed immediately by a long, desperate, weeping plea about their own money. I listened to each selfish excuse. I didn't make any promises. I didn't scream or lecture them. I just stated the exact same unshakable boundary, calmly, every single time. I didn't freeze a dime, Grandma Veronica did. And she did it because not one grown adult in this family said a single word when my babies were called not real family right at her front door. After the 7th call, I powered my phone completely off. Miles had stopped sketching. He was watching me from the desk chair with those ancient, serious eyes. It was the heavy look he gets when he is mentally cataloging a tragedy he doesn't fully understand yet, but knows is life-changing. "Who keeps calling, Mom?" "Family." He chewed on his bottom lip, thinking hard. "The same family from yesterday?" "Yeah, baby, the exact same ones." He nodded slowly and went right back to his drawing. He understood, but the desperate panic wasn't just contained to digital text threads anymore. The greed was bleeding out into the real world. At 10:45 p.m., that night, a heavy, violent pounding suddenly shook the motel room door. Boom, boom, boom. It was the terrifying kind of knock that completely ignores boundaries and promises violence. I leaped off the mattress. Layla whimpered in her sleep, tossing under the thin blanket. Miles shot straight up in his bed, his eyes wide with pure terror. I crept quietly to the door, keeping the metal chain lock firmly engaged, and peered through the small glass peephole. Standing right under the flickering, sickly yellow breezeway light was my mother, Diana, and looming dangerously right behind her, towering over her shoulders with his face flushed beet red with rage, was Troy. "Open the door, Gwen," Troy barked, smashing the flat of his heavy hand against the cheap wood. "Gwen, please," my mother begged, her voice cracking with pathetic desperation. "We drove all the way out here in the dark. You are killing this family. You need to call Grandma back right now and fix this." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped, panicked bird. But my voice? My voice was made of absolute steel. I wasn't a wounded daughter anymore. I was a mother guarding her cubs. "You have exactly 5 seconds to step away from this door," I warned through the narrow crack. Troy aggressively shoved his heavy boot against the bottom frame, testing the strength of the metal chain. "Don't you dare pull this stunt on me, Gwen. That trust money pays for my business inventory. You are ruining my entire life over a stupid little misunderstanding at a porch. Open the damn door right now and let's make a deal." A deal? He was actively stealing my children's safety net to fund his bankrupt fake lifestyle, and he actually wanted to negotiate. I leaned my face right into the crack of the door. "Listen to me very carefully, Troy. My hand is wrapped around my cell phone. The numbers 9 and 1 are already dialed. You take one more step toward my sleeping children, and I swear to God I will have the county sheriff drag you both off this concrete balcony in handcuffs. Do not test me tonight." He stared at the dark crack in the doorway, his chest heaving with trapped fury. He finally looked into my eyes and saw the chilling truth. I was no longer the quiet, compliant niece they could bully. He muttered a filthy curse, grabbed my weeping mother tightly by the arm, and stormed off down the shadowed walkway. I locked the deadbolt, slid down the solid wood, and finally gasped for air. The quiet war wasn't just on paper anymore. It had followed me to my front step. "Let me ask you something real. If you were leaning against that motel door in the dark, and your grandmother had just named names, frozen the cash, and set the whole toxic family on fire to protect you, would you feel an overwhelming sense of relief or a crushing wave of guilt?" Because sitting on that dirty carpet, I felt both violently colliding inside my chest, and I didn't know which emotion to trust. Tell me in the comments, relieved or guilty? Because while Troy and Diana retreated into the night, Martha was secretly plotting a much more dangerous move, aiming right at the one person holding the keys to the kingdom. 36 agonizing hours after Grandma Veronica dropped her digital bomb, Martha finally made her strategic move. A brand new message pinged in the Frozen family group chat. Her tone had shifted entirely. It was no longer dismissive, it was suddenly measured, falsely reasonable, and sickly sweet. This situation has gone entirely too far. Family meeting tonight, 9 p.m. via Zoom. We need to settle this like mature adults before Mama makes permanent decisions she can't take back. Everyone please join so we can heal. I stared blankly at the glowing screen. Martha was desperately trying to reclaim the room. She was attempting to pull the entire scattered family into a digital space that she alone could control, expertly framing herself as the calm, rational peacemaker. I refused to give her the stage. I was perfectly content to stay out of her twisted theater, but then my phone buzzed again. A private text from Grandma Veronica. "Join the call, sweetheart. I'll be there too." I agreed. But exactly 5 minutes later, a third frantic text arrived. It was Tara. "Gwen, Mom just left the house in a total panic. She is driving straight to the rehab center right now. She said she is going to get to Grandma before the Zoom call even starts. She is going to corner her alone in her room and force her to sign a written retraction before anyone logs on." I didn't stop to think. I didn't plan. I simply moved. "Miles, grab your shoes right now. Layla, get your bunny. We are leaving. Now!" I threw our duffel bags into the trunk of the car with reckless force. I peeled out of the Comfort Inn parking lot, my hot tires screaming in protest against the rough asphalt. The drive to the county rehab center usually took 25 long minutes. I did it in 16. My shaking hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned bone white. I was completely breathless, my own pulse roaring in my ears like a freight train. I was absolutely not going to let Martha isolate and threaten an 85-year-old woman who was still physically recovering from major surgery. Not today, not ever. I slammed the brakes violently in the hospital parking lot, hoisted Layla tightly onto my hip, grabbed Miles's small hand and sprinted full speed through the heavy automatic double doors. We ran desperately down the sterile linoleum corridors, dodging startled nurses and heavy medicine carts. The squeak of my shoes echoed off the pale walls. Room 3114, room 3116, room 3118, room 320. And there she was, Martha. Her manicured hand was firmly gripped around the brass doorknob of Grandma's recovery room. She was leaning her weight into the heavy wood, about to forcefully push her way inside to do her dirty work. "Don't you dare," I yelled. My voice rang out down the long, quiet hallway, cutting through the sterile air like a swinging blade. Martha whipped around, her dark eyes widening in absolute terrified shock. She hadn't expected the quiet niece to show up to the fight. I closed the distance between us in 3 long strides, planting my body firmly right between her and the heavy wooden door. "You are not going in there," I hissed, my chest heaving with adrenaline. "You are going to sit down, open your laptop, and log into that Zoom call right out here in the hallway, where every single person can watch you." At exactly 8:55 p.m., I opened my own laptop on a small, wobbly plastic table in the hospital's family waiting area, just down the hall. Miles and Layla were sitting quietly on a vinyl sofa next to me, eating stale pretzels from a vending machine. I logged in. 20 separate squares filled my glowing screen. It was incredibly messy. Real life is always messy. Uncle Richard and Aunt Patricia sat side by side on their couch, looking grim. Cousin Derek was alone in what looked like a dark garage, wiping grease off his hands. Nicole was pacing nervously in her bright kitchen. Tara was sitting on a bed, and I noticed she had strategically positioned her camera so the wall behind her was completely blank. She didn't want Martha to know which room she was hiding in. Diana's square was completely dark. Her camera was switched off, just her plain white name glowing on a black background. Someone's cheap microphone was echoing loudly. Another cousin was actually driving, the passing streetlights flashing rapidly across his worried face. And right there in the bottom row sat Grandma Veronica. Her camera was on. She was sitting perfectly upright in her hospital bed at the rehab center, her striking white hair pinned neatly back, her sharp reading glasses resting on the bridge of her nose. She looked exactly like a powerful CEO waiting to begin a hostile takeover she had already won. Then there was Martha's square. She was sitting miserably on a hard wooden bench in the rehab hallway. The harsh, fluorescent hospital lights glared unmercifully off her forehead. She looked entirely trapped. Martha unmuted her microphone. Her hair was perfectly styled, fresh red lipstick applied. She had clearly rehearsed her little speech. "Thank you all for being here," Martha began, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "Mama, I want to start by saying that I love you very much, and I think there has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. Whatever tall tale Gwen told you, she is completely blowing this entire thing out of proportion. I simply said the reunion was meant for family. She took it the wrong way because she's sensitive." Grandma Veronica didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just stared dead into the camera. Martha talked for 4 excruciating minutes. She desperately used the word misunderstanding 5 times. She brought up context 3 times, and whined about being taken out of proportion twice. She complained heavily about how incredibly hard she works on the reunion, how stressful the intense planning is, and how she would never ever intentionally hurt anyone in this family. When she finally finished her pathetic monologue, the entire Zoom call went dead silent. 20 tiny squares, 20 glowing faces, and every single one of them was looking silently at one person, the old woman sitting quietly in the hospital bed. Martha had played her best hand, thinking her fake tears would save her, but she had absolutely no idea the devastating financial trap Grandma Veronica was about to spring right in front of everyone. Grandma Veronica calmly adjusted her sharp reading glasses. "Martha, are you completely done?" Martha swallowed hard. "Yes, Mama. Good. Now I will talk." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. In my family, when Veronica Pruitt speaks slowly, you listen much faster. "First," Grandma began, her tone slicing through the digital silence like a cold knife, "you looked my granddaughter right in the face and told her she wasn't real family. You said it at my front door, at my house, at a gathering that I fully pay for. And you said it right in front of my great-grandchildren. A precious 8-year-old boy and a sweet 5-year-old girl heard you spit those words." Martha opened her mouth to protest, a fake apology resting on her tongue. Veronica simply held up one single, steady finger. Martha instantly closed her mouth. "Second," Grandma continued, her voice hardening into steel, "I called David Hayes yesterday afternoon. Gwen's trust disbursement, $4,800 a year, has been faithfully deposited into Diana's checking account for the past 4 years. Gwen has never received a single penny of it. $19,200 of protected trust money is completely unaccounted for. And thanks to a very helpful, brave bank employee, I now know exactly where every cent of it went. It was wired directly into Troy's failing, pathetic business accounts." Chaos silently erupted across the screen. Uncle Richard's eyes went incredibly wide. Cousin Nicole gasped and covered her mouth with both hands. Derek leaned so far forward in his garage chair he almost fell out of frame. "Third," Grandma stated, ignoring the shockwaves, "the reunion budget I hand over to you each year is $18,000. David carefully reviewed the historical figures. The actual expenses average closer to $9,000. I want to know exactly where the other $9,000 went, Martha. Every single year for the last 6 years. Was that massive pile of missing money secretly funding Troy's lavish lifestyle too?" 20 tiny squares. Not a single sound. The silence was so heavy it felt physical. I could see Richard's wife Patricia aggressively gripping his arm just off camera. Martha's perfectly made-up face had gone completely ghost white. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish pulled out of water. But nothing came out. And right there in the middle row, Diana's square remained pitch black, still desperately hiding. Martha finally recovered just enough breath to speak. "Mama, that's not the expenses. I can explain it all. There were emergency repairs. The porch railing was rotting. The septic tank had a serious issue. I did not ask you to repair anything," Grandma Veronica interrupted, her voice as flat and unyielding as a heavy level. "I simply asked you to host a dinner." Nicole finally broke the tension, shouting from her bright kitchen square, "Martha, just answer the damn question. Where did all the money go?" "I used it for the family's total benefit, for Mama's house," Martha shrieked back, dropping the calm act. "You all enjoy that huge property every single summer, and absolutely nobody else ever lifts a finger to—" "Martha!" Grandma Veronica cut through her panic like a sharp scalpel. "I have my own handyman. I have a trusted contractor I have used for 35 years. I did not authorize you to spend $1 single on my house. Now sit down, shut your mouth, and stop talking." Martha went dead silent. Her red lips were pressed together so tightly they practically disappeared. Grandma Veronica slowly turned her fierce attention to the pitch-dark square. "Diana, turn your camera on." 4 agonizing seconds passed. The black square flickered. Diana finally appeared. Her eyes were bloodshot and puffy, and she was sitting nervously at what I instantly recognized as Martha's granite kitchen table. "Diana, did you know your own daughter wasn't receiving her disbursement?" Diana's chin trembled violently. I truly thought Martha was handling it for her. She promised me she'd make sure." "You thought?" Grandma repeated the word like it tasted incredibly bitter. "You also thought it was perfectly fine to stand safely at my front door and say absolutely nothing while your cruel sister told your daughter and your grandchildren they don't belong in this family. You cowardly forged your own daughter's signature to hide important paperwork during her painful divorce just to protect the money, only to silently hand it straight over to your sister's greedy son." Diana started to cry quietly, but it wasn't the pure, cleansing cry of someone who is deeply sorry. It was the desperate, ugly crying of someone who knows they have been undeniably caught. "I raised you much better than this, Diana, and you are tragically letting your cowardly silence pass straight down to your grandchildren." Every single face on that call was frozen in total shock. Richard was staring down at his thick hands. Derek was slowly shaking his head in disgust. Patricia was covering her mouth. I sat in the waiting room and said absolutely nothing. I didn't need to. Grandma Veronica let the heavy silence crush them for 6 full seconds. Then, she straightened her aching back against her hospital pillows and spoke with the rhythmic, unbreakable cadence of a judge reading a final sentence. "Here is exactly what is going to happen next. I am only going to say this once. 1. All disbursements from the Pruitt Family Trust will remain frozen solid until Martha provides a full, itemized, verified accounting of reunion expenses for the past 6 years. I want every single receipt, every single charge. 2. Gwen's share of the disbursement will absolutely no longer be routed through Diana's dirty account. Starting immediately, it goes directly to Gwen. David Hayes will handle the rapid transfer of 4 years of back disbursements, $19,200. 3. Martha and Diana are officially removed from my will until they deliver a written sincere apology to Gwen, Miles, and Layla, and you will read that apology out loud in front of this entire family. Not in a cheap text message, not in a private phone call. Written and spoken right where everyone can hear it. 4. Next year's summer reunion will be fully organized by Richard. Martha, you are welcome to attend as a quiet guest. You are not welcome to run it ever again." Nicole exhaled a loud, shaking breath. Derek nodded, slow and deeply deliberate. Richard looked exactly like a tired man who had just been handed a heavy responsibility he truly didn't want, but understood he absolutely could not refuse. Martha's Zoom square suddenly went black. She had forcefully logged off. Diana was still trapped on camera, still weeping pathetically, still sitting entirely alone at Martha's huge table. But Grandma Veronica wasn't quite finished. "I am 85 years old," she said, her voice dropping lower. "I built that protective trust so this family would actually take care of each other, not so one hateful person could play God and decide who belongs and who doesn't." She paused, leaning in closer to look directly into the glowing lens. "And I certainly did not survive Raymond Pruitt's tragic death, a brutal national recession, and a painful hip replacement just to watch my sweet great-granddaughter hide behind her mother's leg because a grown adult told her she doesn't count." She abruptly ended the call, plunging 20 glowing screens into darkness, and finally leaving me alone in the quiet hospital waiting room with a brand new, terrifying reality. I had finally won the war, but I had absolutely no idea how to survive the peace. I gently closed the laptop. The sharp click echoed loudly in the empty hospital waiting room. The digital war was officially over, leaving behind a heavy, sterile quiet. Beside me on the rigid vinyl sofa, Miles and Layla had finally surrendered to sleep. They were slumped together. Miles had shifted his small body during the intense call. His thin arm was now draped fiercely over his little sister's back. It was a heartbreaking habit he had picked up right after my divorce, quietly appointing himself as her protector without anyone ever asking him to bear that weight. I sat back in the stiff chair and pressed my cold hands flat against my knees. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel that fiery, joyful rush of triumph people always imagine when they hear a revenge story. Instead, I felt something much quieter, yet infinitely heavier. It felt exactly like a broken bone finally being violently snapped back into its proper place. The relief is profoundly real, but the deep throbbing ache is still there. I had spent nearly 4 decades desperately trying to earn a permanent seat at my own family's table. I always showed up early. I always brought the perfect dish. I laughed warmly at the right times, and I aggressively pretended not to hear the backhanded comments. Gwen is so strong she doesn't need our help, they would say. I knew exactly what that meant. It was their secret code for, Gwen is easy to skip. But today, for the very first time in my entire life, someone finally looked at me and said, "You were wronged, and there will be strict consequences." My phone buzzed quietly against my leg. It was a text from Grandma Veronica. "You okay, sweetheart?" "Yeah, Grandma," I typed back, my thumbs trembling over the screen. "I'm okay. I should have been paying closer attention to the money over the years. That's completely on me." "No," she replied instantly. "That is entirely on them." The screen went dark for a few seconds. Then one more message appeared. "You are always real family, Gwen. Every single day. Don't you ever let anyone convince you otherwise." I typed a shaky thank you. We said our goodnights and I locked the screen, and then I finally cried. It wasn't a loud, dramatic sobbing. I couldn't risk waking my exhausted kids. It was just a silent, crushing release. I buried my face deeply into my rough hands, my tired shoulders shaking violently against the back of the waiting room chair. I wasn't weeping because I was sad. I was crying because for the first time in 4 agonizing years, I didn't have to exhaust myself explaining why I mattered. Someone already knew. 3 days after that explosive Zoom call, reality set back in. I was back home in Memphis. Miles was safely at summer camp, and Layla was playing at daycare. I was sitting alone in the bleak hospital break room right between 2 grueling ER shifts. I was chewing mechanically on a stale granola bar, staring blankly at a buzzing vending machine like it owed me an apology. My phone lit up. A text from Tara. "Mom wants to talk to you. She won't actually call you herself. She begged me to ask." I took a slow breath. "What exactly does she want, Tara?" "She wants to know, if she writes the apology letter, will Grandma unfreeze the accounts?" There it was, the ugly, naked truth. Not, "I am so sorry." Not, "How are the kids doing?" Not, "Can we please talk about the immense pain I caused?" Just simply, "If I do the bare minimum, will the cash start flowing again?" "I don't control Grandma," I typed back, my heart turning to stone. "I know," Tara quickly replied. "But Mom thinks you do. She genuinely thinks you are the mastermind pulling all the strings now." I took another dry bite of my granola bar, chewed and swallowed hard. "That is the entire problem, Tara. Your mother assumes everyone operates the exact same dirty way she does, moving people around like game pieces, pulling hidden strings, and arrogantly deciding who is in and who is out. I didn't pull a single string. I just told the honest truth to the one person who would actually do something about it." Tara went quiet for a long minute. Then she sent one final message. "I told her you wouldn't listen. Gwen, for what it's worth, she hasn't slept a wink. She has been frantically tearing through her filing cabinet since 7 a.m. looking for old receipts. I honestly don't think she is going to find enough to cover the missing money." I read the words, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity for Martha. A tiny part of my old self desperately wanted to. I wanted to find a way to feel sweet compassion for an aging woman tearing her house apart in a blind panic at dawn. But then, my mind instantly flashed back to Layla's tear-streaked face buried tightly in my neck on that porch. I remembered the heavy, devastating weight of her small body as I carried her back to the car in the dark. Martha didn't ask Tara how Miles felt. She didn't ask if Layla was okay. She only asked about the frozen vault. That horrifying fact told me everything I would ever need to know about my aunt. But while Martha was aggressively digging through trash for fake receipts, a shocking email suddenly landed in my inbox from the one person whose silence had hurt the most. My mother, and her twisted version of an apology was about to force me to draw the hardest, most painful line of my entire life. 10 agonizing days after the hospital Zoom call, an email finally arrived from my mother. The subject line was simply, "I'm sorry." I opened it sitting alone at my quiet kitchen table, long after putting my kids to bed. The glowing screen illuminated the dark room. It was exactly 5 lines long. "Gwen, I'm sorry you felt hurt by what happened at the reunion. I should have said something. I hope you understand the position I was in. I hope we can move past this and be a family again." I read the brief message 3 separate times. Then, I set my phone face down on the cool wood and poured myself a glass of ice water. My blood boiled. "I'm sorry you felt hurt. Not, I am deeply sorry I hurt you. Not, I am disgusted I stood there and let my cruel sister humiliate my innocent grandchildren. She was only sorry I had inconvenient feelings about her betrayal. I hope you understand the position I was in." Translation: I hope you will feel sorry for my awkward discomfort instead of holding me accountable for my cowardice. Move past this and be a family again. As if the core problem was my sudden confrontation, rather than the toxic years of silence that built up to it. I didn't reply to her. I simply forwarded the pathetic email straight to Grandma Veronica without adding a single comment. The very next morning, Veronica replied directly to Diana and copied me. Her response was a masterclass in holding a firm line. Diana, this is absolutely not an apology. This is a selfish request to be forgiven without actually changing your behavior. You did not name what you did wrong. You did not take an ounce of real responsibility. You placed your own mild discomfort completely above your daughter's severe pain. Try again. My mother called me later that same afternoon. She was crying hysterically. What do you want from me, Gwen? I said I was sorry. I want you to say exactly what you did, Mom, not what I felt. She stammered, completely trapped. You stood safely at that door. You heard what Martha spat at your own grandchildren, and you chose to say absolutely nothing. That is exactly what I need you to write. She hung up on me, and for 3 heavy, exhausting weeks, she didn't call back. But when she finally did, our entire world looked different. 4 weeks after the explosive digital meeting, the scattered pieces of our family finally settled into place. It wasn't neat or pretty. Real consequences never are. But it was undeniably clear. Martha finally produced a partial accounting of the missing reunion expenses. It was partial because the crumbled receipts she managed to gather only covered about 65% of the massive budget. The other 35%, roughly $37,800 over 6 years, she falsely claimed had gone to general property maintenance. David Hayes, the trust attorney, wrote a very polite legal report to Grandma Veronica. His exact phrasing was, "The provided documentation completely fails to support the stated expenditures." Grandma Veronica's final ruling was swift. Martha would be forced to repay $25,000, a strict compromise figure permanently deducted from her future payouts over the next 7 years. There were no police called, no outside lawyers hired beyond Hayes. It was a messy family matter handled strictly within the family, but it was definitively handled. Martha was forced to write her apology. It took her 4 separate drafts to get it approved. She read it aloud on a second, highly monitored family Zoom call. Her voice was incredibly stiff, her jaw locked tight, her dark eyes looking just above the camera lens instead of directly into it. She clinically apologized for the specific words spoken on the porch and for any financial discrepancies. It was entirely careful and rehearsed. It wasn't true remorse, it was forced compliance. I accepted it for exactly what it was and moved on. Diana, however, wrote a second letter. This one was profoundly different. She wrote, "I knew Gwen's money wasn't reaching her. I let Martha convince me it was being saved because it was easier than fighting. I didn't ask the hard questions because I didn't want to lose my comfortable place living in Martha's house. I chose my own comfort over my daughter's survival. And I tragically chose it all over again when I stood silently at that door and watched my grandchildren get turned away." I read those raw words twice, tears stinging my eyes. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was the very first completely honest thing my mother had said to me in 12 years. My frozen trust disbursement arrived via direct deposit exactly 3 days later, $19,200. I immediately moved every single penny into a high-yield savings account strictly reserved for Miles and Layla's future education. By the end of September, Diana officially moved out of Martha's house. November arrived, bringing a crisp, cool autumn breeze to Memphis. The large oak trees along my quiet street were just starting to turn brilliant shades of orange and gold. Diana called me on a chilly Thursday evening. She sounded remarkably different. Her voice was smaller, perhaps a bit humbled, but much steadier. She had rented a tiny, 1-bedroom apartment 25 minutes away from Grandma Veronica's farm. She was working part-time at a local garden center. For the first time in 4 years, she was no longer sleeping under her sister's controlling roof. "Can I come visit you and the kids?" she asked softly. I stood at my kitchen counter, watching Miles through the glass window. He was in the fenced backyard, fiercely kicking a soccer ball against the wood, proudly counting his own rebounds. "Yes," I answered slowly, but not to pretend nothing happened. "I know," she whispered. She drove up the following Sunday, making the 9-hour trek from Camden to Memphis entirely alone. She arrived in the late afternoon carrying simple plastic grocery bags. It wasn't a grand sweeping gesture to buy our love. It was just fresh chicken, small potatoes, and the fragrant herbs needed for her one truly great recipe. The same roasted chicken she used to make on Sunday evenings when I was a little girl. Miles greeted her politely at the front door. He offered a stiff hug that lasted exactly 3 seconds. He is old enough to remember the sting of rejection, but still young enough to leave the door slightly cracked open for redemption. But Layla was the one who brought the entire house to a standstill. She stood frozen in the narrow hallway, looking way up at Diana, her tiny head tilted to the side, gripping her worn-out stuffed rabbit by one floppy ear. She studied her grandmother's face carefully. Then she asked, "Is Grandma nice now?" Diana's face completely crumbled. It wasn't performance crying. It wasn't a manipulative tactic to gain sympathy. It was the devastating, soul-crushing weeping that comes from hearing a 5-year-old ask a tragic question that should never, ever need asking. I didn't rush forward to comfort her. I didn't offer a tissue or a soothing word. I let her stand there and feel the agonizing weight of it. She needed to carry that guilt. After a long minute, she wiped her wet face with a shaking hand and knelt all the way down to Layla's eye level. "I'm trying very hard to be, sweetheart," she choked out. "I'm really, really trying." That night, after the dishes were washed and the kids were tucked safely into bed, I sat across from my mother and said the final thing I needed to say. "We can slowly rebuild this relationship. But going forward, I need you to loudly choose me when it is incredibly hard, not just when it is easy and convenient. I am sharing this deeply personal story with you because I know someone out there desperately needs to hear it. Not for the sweet revenge, and certainly not for the recovered money. You need the part where you finally realize that you are allowed to stop exhaustingly auditioning for the exact people who should already love you unconditionally." I drove 14 hours so my beautiful children could know their roots. I carefully carried a heavy glass dish made from my grandmother's sacred recipe. I stood on that wooden porch with my hands wide open, and the door was slammed directly in my face by a woman who arrogantly decided I wasn't enough. And it was allowed to happen by a mother who decided her comfortable silence was much cheaper than her courage. Here is the absolute truth I learned. Leaving is never a weakness. It is your very first, most powerful boundary. When you pick up your babies and bravely walk away from a toxic place that refuses to make room for you, you are not running away. You are actively choosing them over a broken seat that was never truly offered. Telling the truth is not manipulation. I didn't scheme in the shadows. I didn't plot an evil downfall. I simply called my grandmother and reported the facts. What other adults chose to do with that glaring truth was their burden to carry, not mine. And remaining silent in the face of absolute cruelty is never peacemaking. It is a deliberate choice. My mother made that terrible choice at the front door, and it took her 4 miserable months to finally understand the devastating cost. We are not magically fixed. My mother and I do not have a shiny, perfect Hallmark movie ending, but we do talk on the phone every single week now. Sometimes the conversations flow easily. Sometimes they are incredibly careful and measured. She drove back to Memphis for Thanksgiving. She sat quietly at my table. She patiently helped Miles with his tough math homework. She read Layla a sweet bedtime story. It was beautifully quiet, totally ordinary, and for right now, it was enough. This coming August, we are packing up the car and going back to the reunion. Uncle Richard is organizing the entire weekend. Grandma Veronica promises she will be sitting right on the porch this time, showing off her brand new hip. Miles looked up from his sketchbook last week and asked, "Mom, are we really going to the reunion this year?" I smiled, running my hand through his hair. "Yes, baby." And this time, absolutely nobody is standing at that door. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire wild journey. If this story hit home for you, or if you've ever had to draw a painful line in the sand with someone you deeply love, even when it cost you everything, I would genuinely love to hear about it. Drop your own story down in the comments. I sit and read every single one. And if you are new to this channel, this is exactly what we do here. Real stories, real boundaries, real consequences. Subscribe if that sounds like the kind of strength you need in your daily life. I've got another incredible story coming up next. This one involves a lavish wedding, a stolen seating chart, and a monstrous mother-in-law who mistakenly thought she ran the entire reception. The links are right down in the description. I will see you there.